BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Liam McLeod, and this is the Scottish Football Podcast. All the news, views and analysis you need on Wednesday the 22nd of January. And we're looking ahead to what is a massive European match in Glasgow.
It's in! It's Hattati! It's Gulacci providing it on a plate for Real Hattati as he makes it Celtic 3, RB Leipzig 1.
Could be that this is a season-defining match for Celtic when it comes to continental competition, but have the Scottish champions lost a little bit of sparkle in the last few weeks?
It's a game we're really excited about. The Champions League story so far has been, in the main, really good for us, and especially at home. So we're excited about the challenge of the game and looking forward to it.
Can Brendan Rodgers get his team firing on all cylinders this evening? You'll get everything you need to know about Celtic against Young Boys right here.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
So thank you very much for listening and for streaming and hopefully for subscribing as well. It's Liam McLeod with you, and I'm joined by Tom English, BBC Scotland's chief sports writer, and Michael Grant, the Scottish football correspondent at The Times. Gentlemen, how are we doing?
Splendid.
Excellent, Liam.
Brilliant. And we're in the bleak midwinter at the moment. Michael, are you enjoying your football, though? Is it getting you through it?
Yeah, I particularly enjoy sitting in freezing Scottish grounds for about 3 hours in total. It doesn't get any easier as you get older, that, you know.
No, that's not what I wanted
look
to hear.
Look at the happy faces on the two of you. Look, you can tell, the listeners can tell, Aberdeen fans, look at you. All is right with the world again.
Well, I was just about to say, never mind the football. What Michael needs is a heated gilet. I can very much recommend those things. They will change your life.
I've been aware of this. You could just get a gig working in the studio all the time, like our colleague here.
Well, I will be in Manchester tomorrow night, Michael. So, they do occasionally let me out of the office, occasionally.
I'll be there too. I'll check that you're there.
Kenny McIntyre needs his handheld every Saturday. That's why I'm in the cosy office. There's nothing to do. I would much rather be out in the freezing cold with you and Liam.
Who better to do it, Tom? Thank you very much. Yeah, but listen, we'll look ahead to Manchester United Rangers on the podcast tomorrow. But this one is all about the Champions League, and there is loads to talk about with Tom and Michael, and so little time to do it. Tom, firstly, in terms of Celtic's season, and given they've pretty much got the league wrapped up and they've already got the League Cup, they hope to win the Scottish Cup as well. Favourable draw in the fifth round too. I guess when I talk about how big a game it is in terms of their season, I'm talking about their European season.
Yeah, I mean, this is it. We've been saying it all season. This is the testing ground for Celtic. Domestically, you would expect them to win the league, obviously, and probably 2 cups. They're on their way already. That is not the true barometer of where Celtic are at because they're so far ahead of everybody else in this country. It's Europe is where we need to test them primarily. And they're showing up well, Liam. They're 1 win away pretty much from getting through. You'd expect them to beat Young Boys. They're in a horrible state. So Celtic have created this very promising situation for themselves after the horror show in Dortmund. And fair play to them for that.
Yeah, it's been a really encouraging Champions League campaign for them so far, Michael. And as Tom says there, a win will pretty much do it. I think a win combined with one other result going their way. So, for example, Arsenal beating Dinamo Zagreb would confirm that they will finish at least in an unseeded position for the knockout playoff round. So, lots of incentive there for them, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. This is what Brendan Rodgers said was his target when he came back to Celtic second time around. He said they wanted to make European progress. Understandably from him, that was a little bit vague. It was difficult to know exactly how he would measure that, especially in the new format of the Champions League. Of course, when you don't have that drop into the Europa League after a group campaign, so there wasn't that prospect of doing okay, dropping into the Europa League, and then see how far you go there. Now it's very much you're judged on this new format. There's no hiding place in a league like that. But he said himself, or Rodgers has said, that he thinks this new format is advantageous to Celtic, and I think we're seeing that. When the draw was made, I think the Celtic people were quietly pleased with that draw, and others could make a bit more noise and say, well, that's a good draw for Celtic, and it's proven that way. But you've got to go out and get the results. Nothing's handed to you at this level. And they started like a train in that Bratislava match, 5-1. They then have the Dortmund thing, and we think, well, here we go again. We've seen this movie with Celtic. We've seen it with Brendan Rodgers. We even saw it with Postecoglou. But I think since then they've been pretty impressive. The draw with Atalanta was a kind of different kind of Celtic in Europe, wasn't it? The kind of defensive discipline and the concentration. And then the Leipzig game was thrilling, really exciting football at Parkhead. They dominated that match. And then a couple of draws. Okay, I think maybe they would have expected to take something more than that from Bruges and Zagreb. But it's kept them right in there. And as you said, Liam, they're at home to the team that's the weakest team in the 36 strong league. And you think you will literally never have a better chance of progressing beyond beyond Christmas, beyond the league phase, the group phase, into the knockout rounds.
Yeah, it's all changed. Of course, we've got Champions League and Europa League matches in January now because of the new format. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to Scottish football, whether it's the national team or the club side, you take nothing for granted when it comes to European games or qualifiers, or even at this stage of the Champions League. But Young Boys, they won the title last season. They've actually had a good period over the last number of years after years of not winning the Swiss title. But they're one of three sides still without a point in the league phase. They've conceded 22 goals, which is more than any other team. They lost 5-1 at Stuttgart on match day 6 last time out. They have had an absolutely disastrous title defence so far in Switzerland, Tom. So quite frankly, if Celtic don't win this game at home in front of a packed crowd and everything that goes with it in a Champions League night, then they're never going to get through to the knockouts.
Yeah, well, I would say never. I mean, I wouldn't write off the rest of time. But
you catch my point, though, don't you? You get my drift.
I take.
This is as good a fixture as Celtic could have hoped for. Anyone could have hoped for at
100%.
home to a side struggling both domestically and in Europe. This is a massive opportunity for them.
As Michael said, they're the weakest of all the teams in the Champions League. They've had their worst domestic start of a season in 100 years. They're conceding goals left, right and centre. This is it. This is a glorious opportunity. You couldn't have handpicked a better fixture for Celtic to get the job done and get into the playoffs than this one. So the draw and the flow of the games has worked to Celtic's advantage for sure. But they've had to amass this points total to give themselves a shot at getting through against the weakest team. I mean, I'd be staggered if they don't do it. I know Celtic haven't been great of late, but I think they're going to win this game comfortably. I think the Champions League, the whole aura and expectation and atmosphere of the Champions League, I think is going to sweep them along, and I suspect it's going to sweep Young Boys away. This is different gravy now. This is not kind of Brendan Rodgers maybe guarding against complacency domestically because they're so far ahead. This is Champions League. This is big boy stuff with a huge prize at the end of it.
I mentioned at the start there, have they lost a bit of sparkle? And Tom kind of hinted at it there, Michael. And that, this comes from the fact that they've set such high standards this season. But they've dropped points in their 2 visits to Dundee over the course of the last month. Lost to Rangers, who pushed them all the way in the League Cup final. They were made to work by Kilmarnock in the Scottish Cup at the weekend. Is that a concern for Brendan Rodgers just now? Or is it just a case of, look, it doesn't matter how good a team is, they're going to have a little dip at some point across the season?
Well, that was exactly what he said after the Kilmarnock match. He said, if you look at the volume of games in the recent 3 weeks or so, he said the best teams in the world will hit, I think he called it a barrier. It's basically hitting a wall, just like a period in a game or a whole game where it just doesn't click. The players can't quite get themselves up. I mean, to be honest, well, he was talking there, I think, about coming on the back of the Dundee draw, which he was really critical of, if you remember. He talked about soft defending and if you can lip read, he said more than that when he was standing on the touchline about
Saw that, yeah.
Robertson Trusty. But they came back against Kilmarnock. I was at that match, and really they could have buried Kilmarnock under quite a few goals. They had that run, Liam, from about mid-December up to and including the Old Firm game, when they only won 2 games in 6 within 90 minutes. But they only lost 1, which was the Old Firm game, and they did win the cup final on penalties. So Celtic's blips tend to be pretty minor compared to other teams' blips. They don't go on runs of 10 or 11 games without a win. Their blips can be narrow victories rather than anything really more dramatic than that. But yeah, they've had the drop points in Dundee and Tannadice, and the Old Firm game was the Old Firm game was a bad day at the office, to put it mildly. But I actually said to Rodgers after the game, "Do you feel that the team's in a good place going into the Young Boys game?" And he was pretty clear that he did feel that. I mean, they've got basically all the players that are available, aren't they? I don't think they're missing anybody.
No, nobody crucial, no.
Off the top of my head, yeah. So, and as you guys have both said, that this is the one. Win this match, and you have tangible progress in Europe. Now, listen, let's not get carried away. It only puts them into the last 24. They've gone from a 36-team league, hopefully, into a 24 knockout round. But it's progress, because it's getting beyond that league/group phase into the 2-legged ties again.
We're going to hear a little bit now from the Celtic camp. They've been speaking to the media on the eve of the match, just last night. The media conference ahead of the match against Young Boys. The Celtic captain, Callum McGregor, who knows exactly the importance of this game and the incentive that is there if they can get that victory.
Yeah, I think as players, you want to be in the rhythm, you want to play every 3 or 4 days, so we've had that over the last sort of 2 months. Players have been dipped in and out as well, so there's a freshness there, and I think at the weekend we were very good, especially with the ball, very, very good, very dangerous, should have scored more than 2, but the zip and the energy was there from the team, so that fills me with confidence when we go into tomorrow night's game. The players feel good about themselves, and like you said, it's a big game, almost like a sort of shootout type game, so that's good for us. We know where the mentality has to be, we know what's required to get the job done, and now the onus is on us as players to go and deliver that.
Right, so Celtic underperforming but still getting results. They've got Dyson Maida back after a couple of games out, and again he displayed his importance to the side against Kilmarnock at the weekend. Adam Ida and Kyogo, are they getting enough out of those two this season, Tom?
Well, Adam Ida, first of all, right? 9 million, maybe overspent on him. Maybe. We'll see down the line. I mean, he's not... I had it in my head that Adam Ida was about 22, but he's actually 23, and he's going to be 24 next month. So you can't classify him as a really young player anymore. I think Ida, he's got 8 goals so far this season.
Yeah.
I think the difference between the first half of this season and the second half of last season, when he arrived, he scored important goals last season. He scored both goals in a 2-1 win against Hibs. He scored against Rangers in the league. He scored the winner in the cup final. He scored and was unplayable against Kilmarnock at Rugby Park the night they secured the league title. So those were important goals, memorable goals. He hasn't really scored memorable goals or important goals this season. You might include the goals against Falkirk in the cup, but that's about it. The rest of them have been the second in a 3-0 or the third and a 4, something like that. So he hasn't been like he has last season. Celtic are still scoring buckets of goals. I know.
Oh yeah,
Kyogo's behind. So he's ahead, I think, of where he was last season in goals, maybe by 1, behind where he was previous 2 seasons. But those were very, very high levels. I think 20 goals and maybe 16 or 17 goals in his first season. So he's still a dangerous player. He's not maybe what he was, but the collective really is impressive. I mean, Celtic They scored 60-something goals in the league. If they continue on that trend, they're going to break the 100-goal barrier. So while maybe the two lads up front are not banging them in goodo, the team is contributing, handsomely.
The one issue perhaps they have, and I think Brendan Rodgers has spoken about it with you, Michael, perhaps at the weekend there, and particularly after that game at Dens, is I remember sitting with John Robertson at the Ross County Celtic match a couple of weekends ago. It was -9. It was a great afternoon. It was a great afternoon for Celtic because they came through with the victory again. But I remember talking to Robbo about the fact that I think that in history, Celtic's best defensive record across the season in the league was 13. And I was asking him how achievable it would be to break that record this season. And I know defensive records are something that Brendan Rodgers was attacking the last time he was in charge. They're now just, I think, a couple shy of that. So it's not going to happen for them this season now, having conceded. I think it was just 4 for months and months. So defensively, Michael, that's something that he'll be wanting to perhaps iron out over the course of the next few months.
But their defensive record has been good in Europe post-Dortmund, and I know it's easy to say, well, post-Dortmund, you can't write that off. That was horrific for them. But, a clean sheet in Atalanta, okay, they conceded one against Leipzig, one against Bruges, another clean sheet in Zagreb. And, I mean, Trustee a funny kind of player, isn't he? Sometimes he looks really, really impressive, and other times he can be so far off it, I think he is kind of taking over from Liam Scales as the kind of partner for Carter Vickers. Johnson is obviously the settled right back. There has been that question mark about the left back issue, hasn't there, over the last 2 or 3 months, about Greg Taylor's future, about the likelihood of Kieran Tierney coming back into the team, into the club, should I say. I must have, I don't see any massive structural problems there. I think Celtic get the strongest of a pretty reliable back four that's reasonably well protected. I don't think they're going to come under a lot of pressure against Young Boys in this one. The Old Firm game, I think, was lost in midfield rather than defensively, although certainly the defence didn't cover itself in any glory either. But no, listen, I don't think Rodgers will be too concerned about about his back four and goalkeeper. I think he's pretty well covered there. Yeah,
I mean, in fairness, the Atalanta one in Bergamo, that was their first clean sheet since 2017. Yeah. They went on to go to Croatia and pick up another clean sheet there as well. So,
but always, I mean, defenses change over those years, don't they, Liam? It's not like being the same back 4 or 5 or whatever.
Of course.
It's been an interesting. You look at the Champions League for Celtic, and it's been an interesting progression, if you like. The 7-1 against Dortmund, everyone's saying, here we go, same old, wide open, easy to score against, loads of space.
Including you.
Including me. Well, I mean, it was pretty obvious, let's face it. But it most recently says against Zagreb, everyone's kind of going, they could have taken a few more risks in that game, So it's like
that just shows you how far they've come this season. Then
absolutely, they've gone from helter skelter gung ho Celtic to, they're a bit cautious, aren't they? I think Rodgers post Dortmund has got the balance really nice, and I think it's a good team. There's a solidity about them in Europe. They're taking less gambles. And I think they look all the better for it.
So, Michael, are you expecting a pretty special night at Celtic Park this evening?
Yeah, I think they'll get through, Liam. I'd be really surprised. I mean, I was looking back because I think we've all reported on games in the past where teams have come to Glasgow, whether it's Rangers or Celtic, and we've thought, well, Celtic or Rangers will have too much from Celtic alone. In the 2 spells of Rodgers and Postecoglou in between, Anderlecht, Cluj, Copenhagen, Ferencváros, Sparta Prague, Midtjylland, Bodo Glimt, Shakhtar, Club Brugge. Didn't beat any of them.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't beat any of them. And every one there would have been an expectation, certainly in the media, that they would. So I always caveat any kind of presumption that it's going to be an easy night in Europe with the kind of recent history. That said, I do think Young Boys are weak, and I think Celtic are strong. And I would really be surprised if they don't make it. And one last thing I would say, Liam, if you don't mind, it's really interesting that if you look at the league table in this new format, that Celtic are at the moment 21st, say, right? Real Madrid 20th, Man City 22nd, PSG 24th. That means there's three giant clubs there with a bit of jeopardy going into the last couple of games. And sadly, you know what that means? This format won't last.
Exactly.
Yeah. They won't like that. Yeah.
Because these teams will flex a muscle and say, hold on a minute, this isn't going to work for us because we might get knocked out far earlier than we want. And they'll start rattling UEFA's cages. But this season, it's been refreshing. You see teams like Brest are up 6th, 7th in the league. Celtic with real fighting really well and looking to get through as well. So, but yeah, that would be my longer term worry, that the elite clubs will go, hold on a minute, this is too hairy for us.
You might have another layer that if you've got finish in the last 4 spots, there's a playoff. an extra security net for
they'll
them.
find a way. They'll find
it. Michael's dead right. There's no way, if any of these clubs miss out, and maybe even if they just scrape through, that they're not having this. There's no chance. This is not how it was meant to be.
Well, that's their own fault for underperforming, those clubs in this season's Champions League. Celtic certainly haven't. Let's just get a quick prediction from the two guys before we chuck it for the day. Tom, prediction?
Oh, I think Celtic by 3 goals.
3 goals. I mean, they're playing a team inferior to Slovan Bratislava, who they put 5 past, Michael, I suppose. What do you think?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. 3 as well. Possibly more, but I think I could see it being a 3.
Well, we're looking forward to it, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining me on the Scottish Football Podcast, and thank you to listening. Remember, we're here with new episodes of the Scottish Football Podcast bright and early every day. So to make sure you don't miss out, subscribe on BBC Sounds and have push notifications turned on in your phone. And remember, full coverage of Celtic against BSC Young Boys on Sports Sound on BBC Radio Scotland. It is an 8 o'clock kickoff. And don't forget the Champions League highlights on BBC One on Wednesday evening. For now, bye-bye.
Sir Alex Ferguson is the most successful British manager of all time.
Nobody is above him or this football club.
So how did an apprentice toolmaker from Glasgow become one of the most iconic figures in sporting history?
His strength of character, his determination, the fight in him.
He can be persuasive, he can be charming, he can be frightening.
I'm Kelly Cates, and this is Sporting Giants Sir Alex Ferguson.
I didn't want to feel, I couldn't feel.
Listen on BBC Sounds.